Hey everyone, it's Dave. We're back with Thunder, my 1990 Miata. Unfortunately, today's job is to remove the transmission so I can get out a leak from the rear engine main seal. This video is going to focus on removing the transmission, which you might have to do to change the clutch or the seal. I'll post a different video specifically about the leak itself. So let's get started. You're watching Dave's Auto DIY. The first thing we're going to want to do is remove the negative terminal from the battery, as we will be playing with the starter and we wouldn't want to accidentally get a short. To remove the transmission, we also need to remove the shifter. So to get to that, we need to remove the center console and remove all the bolts attaching the shifter.
There are 5 screws holding down the console, 2 in the cubby at the back, 1 on either side at the front, and 1 under the ashtray. Once you remove those, you can sort of pull up on the sides or out on the sides at the front and slide it forward off the gas fill lever at the back. I've posted a much more detailed step-by-step instructions on how to do this. This is just a quick video. If you're interested in seeing some more detail, check out my other video. Link is in the description. More detail on how to change the transmission oil and changing the oil in the shifter turret. There are 4 10mm holding down the outer cover on the shifter and 3 10mm underneath. Once you get those out, you can lift the shift lever out, exposing the shifter turret. You'll have to drain the oil so it doesn't spill all over the place when you are working on the transmission. I use a turkey baster to get the little bit of oil out of the shifter turret. And then you can put some tape or a bag over there just to make sure nothing falls in while you're working on the transmission. It's a good idea to drain the oil from the transmission itself so you don't make a mess with the oil pouring out the back end of the transmission as you tilt it. Remember to open that fill plug, the square plug on the side first, before draining the oil from the drain plug, and get that oil out. And just remember, you're going to need to put fresh oil in before starting the car back up.
We'll have to remove the under tray from the front. Now the instructions I've seen suggest you need to remove the exhaust. In my case, I don't see any obstructions. Normally there would be an obstruction here that goes underneath the power plant frame for this exhaust hanger, but fortunate for me, that's rusted off on mine. And up here, there's a bracket. Again, fortunate for me, that bracket is rusted right through. So I don't see why the exhaust is going to be particularly in the way. I'm going to give it a shot without removing the exhaust.
Moving on to the slave cylinder, the easiest way to access that is remove the front right wheel and going through the wheel well. There are 2 12mm that hold on the slave cylinder. I have a new clutch line. I think if you have the original, there's another bracket to remove the fixed clutch line as well. Once you get those off, you can slide the slave cylinder back such that it is free of the clutch fork on the side of the transmission. And when you get it all free, you can just sort of tuck it up out of the way so it's not obstructing anything.
Now, before attempting to remove the power plant frame, which is this long aluminum piece that connects the transmission back here to the differential, there's a whole bunch of clips. There's a ground strap here. There's a whole bunch all the way along. You've got to remove these wiring harnesses. On the back side, let's see if I can film it, there's little pins like that. You got to pinch the sides in and pull this wire off the power plant frame. So I've got all of the wiring harness disconnected from the power plant frame. I did end up breaking the end connection here on this ground strap, so I'll have to get a new connection there and add it back on. One more thing up here, Here is the speedometer cable. I use a 7/8 inch wrench to loosen that off. And I'll take off the speedometer cable that goes through the PPF. Now I'm going to start at the rear of the power plant frame. These are all 17 millimeters. I'll take out the back one first. Now this one's a little different. This one's got a fitting in the top that it's threaded into. So I'm just gonna back it out part way to start.
The reason you only back that bolt out a little bit is so that it's still threaded into the top fitting, and you can hammer up on the bolt to push the fitting from the top of the PPF frame out.
This is the little piece that presses into the top that I've taken out, and I'll put to the side. And this little piece here on the bottom of the second bolt, you have to pry it out easily or gently. It's not easy. Just a little bit. There's a little place to pry it off on either side with a screwdriver and get that out. And there we go, got the insert out. Continuing to work forward, I'll take out these 17s as well.
Then I was able to get the PPF frame off, slide it off, and set it off to the side.
Okay, where the drive shaft connects to the differential, there are four 14 millimeter bolts. Took me a while to figure this out. I marked which way it came off, just in case it matters, to not put it in upside down. So I'll remember to put it back in the same way. I did not have the back wheels up in the air, and I had the emergency brake on. So I had remembered to keep the car in neutral, but because my wheels were on the ground, and even when I jacked it up, the emergency brake was still on, I couldn't turn the drive shaft to be able to get to all of the 4 bolts. So now I can, so I'm gonna go ahead and remove those. I've soaked them with some penetrating oil already. Turn it off. Now just slide it out of the transmission, and we have the drive shaft off. There's a neutral and backup light switch. Need to disconnect them. They look the same to me, so I just marked one of them with some black marker there so I can remember which of the two to reconnect to which plug.
Now I removed this fitting at the top of the other side that has the 2 wires going into it. That was a mistake. I did not have to remove that fitting. If you feel along the wires further up, there are some press fit connections that you can pull out and leave that fitting on. So that's what I would recommend.
With the weight of the transmission off the engine, it'll tend to tip forward. And then the flange to put the transmission back on will be tilted such that it'll be hard to get the transmission back on. So it's a good idea to install a jack with a piece of wood across the front of the oil pan here, just to prevent the engine from tipping too far forward when the weight comes off the backside. So there are 11 bolts holding on the bell housing. I've started to remove them. I've numbered them, starting here with number 1, 2, 3. This is number 11. I've taken out a few so far, and I've got a box here where I've numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 11, and I've drilled little holes in the box so I can stick the bolts through so I can remember where to put them back, including where there's a bracket. I attach the bracket to the bolt. Most of them are 17. There are two 14 mils. They are not all the same length. That's why it's important to make sure you remember which one goes where. And there's one on the left, the right side here, I haven't got to yet, that supposedly has a nut on the other side. I guess I'll find out. This is a good example of one of the ones that's really tricky. Near the top, I called it bolt number 6. You definitely need a 1/2 inch wobble to be able to do this job, and a whole bunch of extensions to get it down here. And then I had to attach my breaker bar to it, and now I'm going to finish the job with my impact wrench. So I've got this transmission jack attachment that just attaches to my hydraulic jack. I'll put a link. I bought this one at Princess Auto here in Canada. Not so impressed yet, but I'll give it a chance. It's got some chains on it to wrap around the transmission. It's got a knob on here to adjust the angle. So I'm going to lower the car down and see if I can get it to the right height that I can start putting a little bit of weight on the jack, so I can take out the last 2 bolts attaching the transmission.
This is the part where I beg you to hit subscribe. Most of my viewers haven't hit subscribe yet, so I'd really appreciate your support to build the channel.
So I did manage to get it out eventually using my hydraulic jack with the transmission attachment. I used that chain reached over the top. I lifted it enough to get a little bit of the weight off the transmission, removed the last 2 bolts, and was able to slide it backwards and then lower it out of the vehicle.
So I'm getting ready to reinstall the transmission. So I have it positioned back on the jack on the transmission stand. Got a chain over it to help support it. And up in here, I've tie wrapped back the cables in a couple locations. And there's a bracket up here. I just put some duct tape on that to keep it out of the way, to try to keep the path as clear as possible as I'm trying to reinstall it. It was not easy. I end up using this, the smaller jack with the transmission stand and my larger jack, one on each end of the transmission, the larger jack on the rear end of the transmission, trying to jack it up into position straight enough that I could slide it onto the shaft. Eventually I got it, but I got to tell you, that was not easy. So I got it back in and started to attach some of the bolts. I'm using the bolts in the pattern where I marked where they came from to make sure I put them back in the same spot. So even after getting the few bolts at the bottom attached, it was still kind of skewed. There was a large gap at the top of the bell housing and a small gap at the bottom. So to resolve that, I put my hydraulic jack under the front end of the oil pan up there, pushed up, and put a piece of wood across the opening where the gear shift is, and a ratchet strap around the back end, and tried to lift up the transmission from the back end. And that worked to get everything relined up, and I was able to get the top bolts in. So got all the bolts back in using the template I kept to make sure I remembered where all the brackets went and which bolts went in which holes and which ones had nuts. Now I'll start torquing things up. The starter motor bolts are torqued to 28 to 38 foot-pounds. Those are 14 mil, and all the others are 17 mil. The bell cover bolts, and those are torqued to 48 to 65 foot-pounds. So I got the electrical connections replugged in, and there's some little holders on the top. If you reach around, you can feel to kind of tuck the wires underneath. I'm leaving the speedometer cable off. I'm leaving the speedometer cable off for now because if I remember correctly, I need to fish that through the PPF frame before installing that. It was actually quite easy then to slip the drive shaft into the end of the transmission. It just slips in there. And remember to put it onto the differential at the other end where I marked it. See, I put this white line on the drive shaft and on the differential, so I've lined that up. I've got it in neutral and parking brake off, wheels up, so I can rotate it around and get to all 4 bolts. These get torqued up to 21 to 22 foot-pounds. 21 to 22 foot-pounds isn't much, but it still wants to spin when you're doing that back end of the drive shaft. So I put a pipe wrench on the drive shaft just to hold it from spinning, and was able to easily get the 21 to 22 foot-pounds on the drive shaft bolts. Reinsert the slave cylinder through the clutch fork and bolt it back onto the transmission. These are only torqued to 12 to 16 foot-pounds. Next, you can slide the PPF frame back on. I slid on both. It surprisingly went on pretty easily. I had to tap it from the front to the back to get with a rubber mallet to get the holes to line up. The rear bolt is straightforward. The second from the rear, you'll have to remember to put this fitting back in the top that we banged out earlier and line it up with the top hole. And this plug goes into the bottom hole, and then this bolt with the tape with the 2 different diameters is the one that goes in this second one from the back. And I'll just get it started there a little bit. Yeah. So that sucked in the fitting in the bottom, and it sucked in the fitting in the top. So we're good. And all these PPF bolts get torqued up to between 77 and 91 foot-pounds. Then you can go along starting from the front and reattach all those little clips to the power plant frame, and do that before you do the speedometer cable. That'll be the last thing because I did that first and then I had to take the speedometer cable off to be able to fit the wiring harness all the way back, and I had tightened this ground bolt. I had to loosen that off so that I could get it all into position. I'm just going to go back and tighten everything back up. And don't forget to reconnect your battery. So I'm all done, except for refilling it with oil, which I'll show you how to do in a separate video if you're interested. And it was a lot of work, but it was worth it because it gave me access to the real reason I had to remove the transmission, which was to remove and replace the rear main seal, which I'll post in a separate video. And it also gave me a chance to change the seals in the transmission, which I'll post in a separate video. Overall, it was a pretty big job, but I'm glad I got it done. So thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. I hope you hit subscribe, and I hope to see you next time on Dave's Auto DIY.